Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is September the 15th. Can you believe that? The days are going by, the weeks are flying by. It is mind-blowing. We're excited to be here tonight. Our regular panel tonight includes Doug Sartori. Doug, how you doing?
Uh, Great. Absolutely great. In 6 days, I'm going to be doing fantastic.
And where are you coming to us from?
What you see behind me are ostraca, all bearing the name Themistocles. This is the oldest evidence that I know of for partisan activity. You'll note that they are all, there are four different people's hands that wrote these, the name on these ballots, and they were found in a well. And it looks like someone had some kind of a partisan plot going on and dumped the evidence in a well. So this is 2,500-year-old evidence of partisan politics.
And you convinced someone to marry you.
I did 20 years ago, still going.
Well done, man. Congratulations. We also have Pat Papadakis here tonight on the regular panel. Pat, how are you?
Great. Glad to be back. As you know, I'm sure everybody was writing in, where have I been? No, we didn't get any of those. We didn't get any of those messages. No.
There were a couple, I'm sure. We
All
might
right.
have missed them, but I'm sure that's the sentiment generally. Now
I do like the segue from Doug's ostracon, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Doug, the root of that Hellenic word also lends itself to ostracize.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So were they voting them out or in? Do you know?
Yeah, they were trying to exile the man.
Exile.
Yeah.
Great.
Like the California recall.
Yeah.
Well, there is something to be said about what the strategy is in an election campaign. I'm sure we're going to get into it a little bit today, right? It's great.
Undoubtedly. And Pat, you're coming to us in front of a Elections Canada, the classic yellow sign with the black arrow. Is there anything chiseled into the wall there, like as in Grecian times, that Doug might be able to opine on as well?
Well, we'll have to consult with Doug on that.
We'll take a look at that. We are excited to dive into this one. We've got a great show tonight. We're breaking format. We are going to be, diving into the realm of partisan politics. We got a federal election coming up in a number of days, 5 of them to be exact. And we have on some guests, and I think, folks, you are going to be able to really glean and take away some positive takes from this, at the very least. Otherwise, get mad and send us your messages, because we love to get those, undoubtedly. Up first, we will be speaking with Denise Ghanam, past Conservative and municipal candidate. Denise, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. I'm excited to take part in this conversation tonight.
We're really, really happy to have you here. We will also be speaking with Carolyn Davies, nurse practitioner, healthcare activist, and longtime NDP supporter. Carolyn, how are you? Carolyn is muted. That is okay. This is one of those things that happens in these Zoom conversations. We'll take a second.
There I am.
There you
Sorry
are.
about that. Yeah, so no, I'm absolutely tickety-boo, and really looking for September 20th to get here.
And it's coming. It's rapidly approaching. And finally, we have Damien O'Brien, Director of Parliamentary Affairs for Natural Resources Ministry, former Queen's Park staffer, Liberal partisan. How are you, Damien?
I remain in a state of constant bliss. Things are good. I'm also the former Vice President Policy of the Ontario Liberal Party.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Really glad to have you here. I think we're going to have a really well-rounded out show. You know, we've all got our different perspectives here, but we're looking to the three of you to try to glean out those perspectives on policy, about where this election is, where it's going to be going forward. And I guess, even like what the outcomes are going to be potentially. But before we get there, if you're listening tonight and you're a Patreon subscriber, Thank you so much. If you're not, get over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We would appreciate that support. We are in BizX Magazine monthly in print, and we are always online as well at bizxmagazine.com. And please make sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe to us wherever we are on our social media platforms. Wherever you are, we are there for the most part. And wherever you get your podcasts, we're also there. And we have been able to do this broadcast now 16 months into this pandemic, thanks to the kind support of Liuna 625, Building Better Communities. We had to transition. We had to change our entire format from in person to a digital format. And I got the short end of the stick on this one, to be honest. I mean, I drew the short straw. I joined a podcast, looking forward to hang out with some of the coolest people that I knew in politics locally. And I was told within 2 weeks, nope, you don't get to see any of them. It's all going to be digital. That wasn't fair. But we're looking towards another side of the horizon. And you see where I'm going with this. This is a bit of a segue because we're in an election in the middle of a pandemic. So that will undoubtedly be coming up to, we're all going to have our perspective that we're going to talk about. Sorry about that. If you heard that, I have another computer that is faulting and breaking. As I said, we're dealing with technical difficulties at the outset. But let's dive into this. Doug, we're going to go through the round table and state our partisan affiliations and our local involvement. And I can't get over your introduction there with your crazy Grecian ancient history that you regularly do. Doug, you're the kind of guy, it's crazy that like you go, I'm going to go on vacation, and then you tweet for 9 to 10 days straight. Oh, I picked up this history book upon ancient Rome, ancient Greece. Here's what I've been opining. And I just wonder, like, what does your family do while you're on vacation?
This is the second time you've referenced my family. They're used to it by now. So just in terms of stating partisan affiliations, folks who regularly listen to the show will know most of this stuff. I am the president of the Federal Electoral District Association for the Liberal Party in Windsor West. I am a volunteer on the campaign in Windsor West right now. And I am also serving as the regional vice president for the Southwest of Ontario for the Ontario Liberal Party. I'm a Liberal.
And Pat, how about yourself?
Coincidentally, I'm a Liberal as well. Former past president of the Windsor West Federal Riding Association. I believe I chose my successor well, and active in Liberal politics in the region and otherwise for a very, very long time. I think our listeners know that we also have a wider co-host sample. Don Merrifield, I guess, couldn't take it, and we want to, just kidding. Don could make it tonight, and of course, we regularly like to hear different perspectives. So don't hold us against us, but we've got some red in the room today. But we hope to have a really great discussion with the friends that have come here to have this discussion.
Most certainly. And let's just dive straight into this. And I'm just going to go for convenience sake, the way it's showing up on the Zoom board here. So there's no preferences here. Damien, you're up first. Can you talk to me first? How'd you get into politics? And, why are you a, member of your party?
Well, I first got involved in university. In about, I'm going to say 16 years ago, which breaks my heart to say, but I was the president of the Brock University Young Liberals. I'm from Cambridge originally, so it's great to be back in Southwestern Ontario. For those who consider Cambridge part of Southwestern Ontario, I apologize if I've offended anyone. So that's how I got started, and really it was there was a conservative club on campus, but there really wasn't at the time. There's many active clubs now on campus, but at the time, and a few folks got together. There was an election actually about to start then too. I suspect this one may end a bit differently than that one did, but we'll get into that a little later on. Yeah, that's how we got started. And then afterwards, I worked at Queen's Park for a period of time. I worked for 5 cabinet ministers over the course of 10 years. And then after a brief segue, I took a role actually my second role now in Ottawa. And I'll be very upfront. I'm on leave, unpaid leave for my role, and I'm volunteering as I think it's been mentioned. I'm volunteering in Windsor West right now. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you very much. Glad to have had it. Denise, let's bring you up next. Same question. How did you get into this, and why are you a member of the Conservative Party? Why are you conservative generally?
Okay, so the first part of my career, I was fairly apolitical and not interested in politics at all. I was more interested in my job in manufacturing in the automotive sector and in banking. And then I ended up teaching at the university and then eventually starting my own consulting firm. So as I got into business for myself, I got much more interested in politics and what the impact of government decisions made on me as a business owner. And I think that's what drew me to the Conservative Party. I had a friend who was very political and was always trying to convince me that I would have been a good candidate to run in an election. And I kept telling him, yeah, maybe, but it's not the right time. And in 2008, I get a phone call and he says, I know what you're going to say. It's not the right time, but in 5 minutes, you're going to get a phone call from Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister, and he's going to ask you if you're going to run. And I'm hoping you're not going to embarrass me. Yes. And that's how I became a federal candidate in the 2008 election for Windsor-Tecumseh riding. It was a great experience, learned a ton. Obviously did not get elected, but had a really good opportunity meeting people in the community, getting, baptism by fire into the whole political process, and obviously liked it enough that I ran again in 2011. Unfortunately, I was not successful again in 2011, although I did have a great campaign. And it was a really good experience. I then decided I would run as a city councillor. And unfortunately, the day I announced, the mayor's younger brother also announced it the same ward, and it was pretty much over before it ever started in that one. So 3 strikes and you're out in my book. So that was my very short-lived political career.
I do want to say, if I can jump in here, Denise, the 2011 was a really good campaign, and love stories from that was a really good campaign. I'm just curious because I really don't know the answer to this, but I'm just going to ask: was the person who called you and asked you and put up that connection for the call? Did that person have a connection to Rose City politics by any chance?
I believe he does, yes. So certainly somebody you're well acquainted with, I'll say that.
Very
much.
good. So just putting it out there that our Rose City politics roots go far and wide across the political platform.
Absolutely, they do.
Thanks for being here, Denise.
As far as being a conservative, like I said, I think it comes from my background teaching business at the university and sort of my appreciation for market-driven processes. I think that the role of government, I always like to see it as less invasive and try to leave things to individuals to make their own choices and to the market to drive things. So I think that's what drew me to the Conservative Party, sort of from a principled, value-driven standpoint. Right, and hopefully I can share some of that perspective with you guys tonight.
Absolutely. Talk about a real call to office, like an actual phone call. That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And Carolyn, same question to you. How did you get into this, and why are you a supporter of your party?
Well, my history goes a lot further back. As an RN, I was back in Toronto and got a position in a little community health center that was just starting up. We were restoring an old police station so that we could provide health care to the people of Old South Riverdale, if anyone knows that area. They were really being pounded with lead. The children were getting sick. The parents were really concerned, and there were 6 lead smelters in this one little area of East Toronto. So board of directors formed this community health center. There were 2 physicians and myself, We worked tirelessly to fight with the Canada Medals, which was our target because there were 6 of them, so we had to pick on one. Won it. All the children were tested, blood lead levels, the soils were changed, everything happened. And boy, did I learn a lot about politics. But in that area, we also learned about how many people were going without health care. And at that time, OHIP wasn't in yet. So people were still paying their monthly bills. So that was a good learning experience. The other really big experience for me was as a young nurse joining the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. And we were all these youngins who came in with some fairly traditional nurses in there and started recognizing that a lot of the issues that were like determinants of health issues weren't being met. So we were, so I learned a lot of my healthcare politics in both those two places. Yeah, so, but I have also run federally. I've run in the London Fanshawe area, and I've run provincially twice in the London area as well. And just missed out by a few votes against Diane Cunningham there. In fact, they were asking me to declare, and I said, no, I don't think we're ready yet. Haven't counted the big votes up the north of the university. And I was right. And so I know how you feel. And then I ran for city council here in Amherstburg, and I was a council member from 2010 to 2014. Learned a lot of politics there as well. So the first time I became a New Democrat was around that time as a young nurse, because they were really speaking up for the people who didn't.
Well, maybe I'll start off with the questions, and I'll start off with you, Carolyn. That's super, and then we'll go around. I think the first question we have, and this is great because of all the experience that we have around the table, if you will, today. And I'll start with you, Carolyn. You know, what does the public get wrong about election campaigns? What is it, you know, when we work in a campaign and we consider what the public thinks the campaign? I know what I think, but I mean, what in your experience is like you talk to sort of, you know, people at the doors or anywhere else, and it's like, yeah, but that's not really how it works.
I think that they have challenges with the democratic process, in that they only see the door knocking, they only see the telephone calls, they only see the literature, and they don't realize the hard work that all the parties have to dedicate themselves to being representative of what they believe in, whether it be social justice, or whether it be, you know, commerce, or whether it be whatever. But I do think that sometimes one of the phrases that drives me absolutely crazy is, well, they're all the same. They're all crooks. And it's really sad, because I remember when to be a politician was a respected profession. They were statesmen. They were, you know, I could name them, Ed Broadbent, Flora MacDonald, you know, they were all looked up upon. And somehow, I don't know whether it was the stand-up comics or the stand-up comics just took it from other things, but the people lost their understanding of what was truly representative. And as I said, every party has a belief system. And in Canada, all of those belief systems are important. It's coming together so that nobody is left out. And I think that trying to get that message across, trying to be as honest as you possibly can, to not backtrack on your promises, that is probably the biggest thing. And I do know that I was around. In fact, my very first vote, I shouldn't say this, but my very first vote was with Trudeau, before I fell in love with Ed Broadbent. And I think that started the, you know, just watch me, started a kind of a vision of, oh my God, we don't have control, you know. And I think that was kind of the start of a kind of a negative discussion, which shouldn't have happened, but it happened. And I think that we do have a lot of repairing to do. We just have to be transparent. We have to be honest. We have to make sure that what we say we do, and make sure that there's good outcomes for everyone.
Thanks, Carolyn. Denise, I'll go to you. You mentioned earlier, I mean, it was pretty quick turnaround there from you're going to get a call to trial by fire, I think is or baptism by fire. So what was it, that trial, that baptism that you didn't know before that you kind of found out after? Like, what is it that learning experience that maybe not everybody knows in terms of what they get wrong about election campaigns?
Well, I think for starters, people didn't know that it's up to each individual person who is running to raise funds for their own campaign. So I certainly didn't know that. I guess I thought that the party in general supported all the various campaigns. And I mean, they do in the sense of national advertising and some of those things. But in order to run a local campaign, you have to raise funds. And that was sort of the first thing I learned in my, glorious 3 days before the writ was dropped on my first campaign. So, learning how to reach out to people who support the party and, introduce yourself as someone brand new. In the particular circumstances I had, there had been a person planning to run who then had some issues and had to step down at the last minute. So I very much was a bit of a pinch hitter. So yeah, just learning some of those things, learning the politics of politics, that, there are different players at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level, and each of them has perspectives, and they want to share that with you as the candidate. They certainly want to share that with people on the campaign trail. I think one of the biggest challenges is there's always a disconnect that exists between the individual who is running in a local campaign and who wants to represent his or her community and what they want to do in that role, and what happens at a national level with a party. So I think sometimes at the door, you get that disconnect. You're there to talk about local issues and to seek their support as the candidate, and they want to talk about something that happened 2 years ago on the national level, or they want to talk about some ad they saw on TV from a national party. So sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between you as a candidate at a local community level and what's happening with the whole campaign and the parties in general and how they're positioning. And then you throw the media in on top of that. And now in today's day, you throw in social media and every individual opinion that gets put out there. So I think sometimes it's just hard for voters to discern what's real and what's not. And I think sometimes it's difficult for them to make that differentiation between, do I want to support my local candidate or do I want to support the party that I think should govern and the leader that should be prime minister? So I think that's always an interesting challenge that you face as someone trying to run a local campaign.
Absolutely. Those are really good insights. Damien, you haven't been a former candidate, is that correct?
I have not.
Okay, so we have two former candidates, if I may say, based on my experience in working on campaigns, and I don't know if you want to take it there. There is something to be said. I think people may not know that those that work closely in a campaign actually try to shield, I don't know if that's the right word, but that the candidate needs to go out and do the things that the candidate does, and the campaign is a whole different machinery. And oftentimes, they have a job to do, and all the things that they're dealing with are hopefully things that the candidate is just going to go out there and do their thing. And there's actually that difference. And so, not having been a candidate and just taking a look at it from the political campaign perspective, what do you think it is that general public may get wrong about election campaigns?
So I would say, from the outset, is I think that in particularly nowadays, I think people assume there's a level of animosity that doesn't exist. There's actually, I find, a lot of mutual regard. And look, we're 5 or so days out from an election, and I really don't think that what people see, in particular, the things that we've seen, in particular in this campaign, that's not reflective of the experience, certainly, that I've had on campaigns. Folks are doing what they're doing. And as has been said before. In going more to your point, though, look, candidates, people want to see their candidates. People want to talk to their candidates and get a chance to get to know them, I find. And, you know, there's a few folks in every campaign who don't like any candidates, and they're upset for a variety of reasons, and they've got those. But most people I find are genuinely curious. People are very forgiving of the political process in any context. And there's a tremendous amount of patience, I find, because again, it's a volunteer-driven. Campaigns are all, you know, people giving something of themselves, their time, their effort. You know, hopefully some cooking for those. You know, it's not a skill that I have. I've certainly done that on some campaigns to make sure, you know, it's donations, it's people giving of themselves. And I would say to more to your point, a lot of what, you know, folks may not see in a campaign office, it's supporting the candidate in what they're doing. So when, you know, they knock on the door and someone says, yeah, that's great, you know, that person who walked by, you know, I really want to support them, you know, make a note of it, and you know, make sure they get a lawn sign, make sure that you know, a lot of those pieces come into play. Again, it doesn't just happen. I think it's probably the phrase that underscores a lot of my observations. Like these things don't just happen. And I think it can be said of a lot of things in life. Good things don't just happen. It's because individuals make choices and make actions to support a cause or a person or a philosophy. I think someone else mentioned. So yeah, it's a lot of effort, and there's also a certain amount of camaraderie. And you know, in many cases, and I've had the opportunity to attend different political parties events over the years, and you know, you see the same thing in every party. Is a group of people who come together, who work together, who volunteer together, and they kind of grow together, and they have a, you know, a strong bond with each other. But again, it's just going back to what I said at the outset. What a lot of people assume that, you know, oh, well, you're a Tory, you're a New Democrat, you're a Liberal, you can never be in the same room together, and that is totally not the case. I think there's a lot of, notwithstanding the cut and thrust of the issues and the points of difference, and that's important to be able to, why candidates have debates, that's why they talk about this stuff. But at least that's my understanding. I hope someone doesn't disagree with me too much.
Thanks, Damien.
Actually, if I
go ahead.
Can I just
Denise,
piggyback on that? One of the things that I was very thrilled to find out was how hard you have to work on a campaign, but also how much fun you do have. And I kind of want to piggyback on what you just said, Damien, about the people who are willing to volunteer their time and energy to help you as a candidate. I was blown away by that. And the fact that, yes, you're out there and you're knocking on doors and you're making things happen, putting info in there, your database, and getting lawn signs out and trying to get donations and all those good things that have to happen to support a campaign. But somehow it was, even though it's a lot of hard work, man, it was a lot of fun. And there really is this great sense of camaraderie. And I agree also that I think even though the candidates obviously espouse different philosophies and have different opinions, I think there was, in fact, a great level of respect for the other campaigns and for the other candidates and all the work that everyone was doing to ensure that we have, as Canadians, a great democratic process. And that, again, was something that was, having never been really involved before the opportunity to run as a candidate, it was a real eye-opener for me and a really great part of the experience.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that as well. I agree with Damien, is that there's a kind of almost a community that's formed. And sometimes it's people meeting for the first time, and sometimes it's meeting for the 100th time, or through your riding association, or just through your neighborhood, recognizing people at the door, those kinds of things, which is the wonderful part of in a riding where you get to know so many people. But the other issue, and I was actually talking to somebody about this today, is it is about issues, not people. And sometimes that's really hard to, sometimes you hear the reporters and they're talking about who was smiling or what were they wearing or what happened, but it's really, but what did they say? What did they believe in? What would they do for you? And those are the things that I think sometimes gets mixed up, because you're right. I mean, and especially in Canada, we're so fortunate. You could have people from any party outside the politics of trying to have a candidate win, and even then, but you know, we all can still chat with each other about whatever else. I mean, we look at what's going on south of us, where there's such polarization, and I do think that that is one of the gifts that Canadians, I hope, continue to support, is that, you know, once we've made our decision who is in government, it's done. And, you know, some of us are saying, okay, next time we're going to do this, and, or whatever, but that we come together again as a country, and not have the polarization that occurs in other places.
Okay, great points, everybody. And I just want to, just before I transition to the next question, I think if you haven't worked in an election campaign, you may not realize it, and there may be other walks of life and other places where this happens, but the relationships that you form in such a short period of time, how close those relationships can be, the level of trust that you build with the people that you're on a team with, it's something really special. And you know, we're getting to the point in this campaign where I think everyone's probably getting pretty tired. It's been a long 3 weeks so far, and a few days left to go, but the intensity of the relationships that get formed when you go through this experience together is really something special. So just moving on, one more question in terms of talking about campaigns. And I want to start with you, Carolyn. I was really interested in your comments about the lead smelter and your campaign against the lead smelter. And I think that leads into the question that I want to ask each of you. And that is, what, in your opinion, makes for an effective local campaign? You know, and you certainly, you know, it doesn't always have to be a partisan campaign. It can be a campaign for a cause or an issue, but what for you is the main ingredient that makes for an effective campaign?
I believe that it's that the candidate and the campaign believe in what they're doing. So it might be an issue of lead smelting. It might be of plutonium being brought down your river on its way to Sweden to be tanked. You know, it could be again, it could be your local long-term care facility that is desperate for fair wages and adequate staffing and adequate food. You know, it could be something. And a lot of people who become political, and I think they make the best candidates, are the people who say, I believe so much in this or that. Like my grandma had, died in a long-term care facility. I'm never going to let that happen again. Or, you know, somebody get cancer. And it actually happened to a friend of mine who ran in London, where a lot of the people she knew and lived with died from cancer in an area that they were sure they had buried waste. And so she ran on environmental issues. I remember a young boy and I did work for Marion Boyd, the member of parliament, and a young boy came in who was just he was a high school kid and he was working in her office. And we said to him, so what would you like to do? He said, oh, I want to become a politician. And I said, really? So what brings you to that kind of early, young age? He said, oh, because I want to have that power. And I said, whoa, you're in it for the wrong reason. You got to believe in something, and you've got to, because being in power just means that you'll whatever. But I thought that was a critical thing to challenge him with. No, you got to go into it with a belief. You want to make changes that are what you believe are the best thing, and that people agree with you. And if enough people agree with you, you're in.
Great. Denise, same question to you. Absolutely. Same question to you, Denise.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of what you said, Carolyn. I think for a campaign to be effective at a local level, there needs to be some passion about something that's important to the community. So for me, at least at that time in 2008, we were coming out of a recession. The manufacturing sector, particularly here in Windsor, Essex, was being challenged. And I felt like the approach that the Conservatives were taking was the one that was going to be most beneficial to this area. So I was able, as somebody who's worked in that sector, I was able to be passionate about the economic changes that the Conservatives wanted to bring forward and how they were going to be positive and impactful in our community. And I think that it doesn't matter necessarily what the issue is, but I think it does matter that it's something you care about and it's something that you're passionate about. And I think that's the key to having a good local campaign, having people be excited about the ideas of what it is you're trying to accomplish as a candidate and as a representative of the party that you're serving.
Fantastic. Damien, what makes for an effective campaign?
You know, it's great to be with such a group of like-minded folks when it comes to, you know, I'm not going to echo, I'm just going to say right now, I wholeheartedly support what's been said by Carolyn and Denise. More from perhaps an operational side, I think that, you know, having a clarity of vision and having, making sure that that folks know, why they're going about this stuff, because the why of the thing, I find in the campaigns I've worked on, makes for it solves a lot of other problems that may not seem related the same way, like how you do your lists, or the way in which you approach voters in terms of how you engage them. But having from the top, and that's whether that's the candidate, the leader, the platform, and I think, just going back to that point of motivation, what's that driving factor? And it's, sometimes it's, a very much a local issue that has gone unaddressed or that has emerged very quickly. And how is it that the parties and the philosophies upon which they're built, how would they be brought to bear on that? Does the leader of that particular party, has a really, really sharp approach? I like them, and then, or rather, how does the candidate approach that? Where have they come from? What's their experience? And I want to echo some other comments. We've got the two folks in this panel who have run as candidates have had substantial backgrounds, professional backgrounds that had nothing to do with politics, and that that can be a very good thing. It's also the notion of someone who knows how things work, or can leverage that, and that can be done through many different ways, whether that's through background in politics, whether that's professional experience, whether that's how you do that, knowing that there's a candidate of some substance, not just someone who's to the point, someone who wants to be elected to be elected. Someone told me once, you want to see your name on a lawn sign, well, you can go into real estate. You want to make a difference, go into politics. And that's not to anything negative about realtors. I have many friends who are realtors, but
we're all about
idea,
trashing the realtors on this show. I just want to point out, especially when DonMaryfield.com isn't on.
I am not.
I know you're not, Damien.
But it just to to kind of emphasize that point. And I think I always my back always goes up when someone says, what are you about? What brings you in here? And if it's like, I'm running to be something rather than to do something. And so that I think is that could break a campaign when that sentiment kind of breaks in, versus saying, I want to do something, a sense of purpose, and maybe that crystallizes some of the other comments that have been made.
Wow, such narrow-minded thinking. Just give me the power and I'll figure out what to do once I have total control. We don't need to get caught up in the nuts and bolts of what are we gonna do? We'll figure it out once we get there, I promise. No, jokes aside. Really appreciate those perspectives. I'm thinking that we're gonna shift this focus though to the bigger picture here, looking at things nationally and taking a look at the 338 vote projections right now, which for those of you who aren't in the weeds of this, is a national amalgam of all of the different polling that does exist. It has the Liberals at 32%, the Conservatives currently at 31.7%, the NDP at 18.9%, the BQ at 6.9%, the PPC at, I will continue to say this, a surprising 6.1%, concerning 6.1%, quite frankly, and the Greens at a 3.3%, half that of the PPC. So pretty interesting looking at how these numbers are rolling out 5 days from this election. So, I think the first question here is going to be it's going to be a tripod, three-pronged question. Why are we having an election? What do you think is at stake? And what do you think is the elevator pitch that should be made at the door to the voter? Feel free to put it all into one response. Why are we doing this? What's at stake is the real question here. So Damien, I'll start with you.
That's great, because I just jotted those questions down, and so I hope I'll be able to capture them accurately. Look, I think it's no matter what others may say, I would make the case that we're here because people have to make a choice. As there are some big decisions being made by the federal government, and I think that to put them to people is the right thing to do, the democratic thing to do. I would also note that both the leaders of the Conservative Party and the NDP at various points have voted against the government on confidence motions. So I would say it's not as if the other parties didn't necessarily disagree. Perhaps they would dispute that. And I'm sure that Denise and Carolyn will have some points on that. And I think that what's at stake is the recovery. The recovery of what is it that we look that Canada looks like in our and how people what they can expect and what their relationship is with government. And so that's very significant. I think things like childcare, climate change, housing, these are all very critical things. And then in terms of the elevator pitch, I would say, look, fundamentally, like what kind of Canada do you want to see? And there's been more than enough, I think, over the last few weeks. I think all of the parties have made their cases, and now we're in the last 5 days, we're getting into the closing arguments, which each party is making. So, I would say that, and I look forward to hearing from Denise and Carolyn.
Well, thank you for that, Damien. Much appreciated. Let's bring you in, Denise. Next, same question. Why are we doing this? What's at stake? What's the elevator pitch for the voter if you were at the door trying to get the vote?
Well, I think there's certainly been enough questions asked about why are we doing this now, and in the fourth wave of pandemic, with still 1,300 people stranded in Afghanistan who were either Canadian or people who worked with Canadians and have not been able to be repatriated. That question's been asked in the media. That question certainly was asked in some of the debates. That aside, whether this was the right time or not, I do think that there are a number of important questions that need to be answered. And I think Canadians do need to have a say in where we're going forward. Inflation topped 4.1% last month. That's probably the highest level it's been in almost 2 decades. I believe 2003 was the last time it was that high in a month. We are spending far more money than we are taking in as a government and running huge deficits on a daily basis, which to me, I have 2 grandbabies, a year and 3 years old, and I worry, how are they going to afford our government 20, 30 years down the road if this is the path we continue on? So I think those are some important questions. I definitely think how Canada responds to global climate change is critical. We are small in terms of our overall contribution to carbon emissions at 1.5%. We are still a big contributor in the sense of that we have an opportunity to work on that and to change that. And I think Conservatives have a good, feasible and doable plan to address that. So I think that's an important issue that voters should have a say on. So I think all of those things kind of together, the slogan that the Conservatives have put forward is securing our future. I think there's something to be said for that. I'm concerned with the path that we're on currently with Trudeau as Prime Minister. I'm concerned with the lack of accountability and some of the scandals that have occurred over the past number of years. I'm concerned with some of the choices that he has made as our Prime Minister, and certainly with his spending record in the past and what he is projecting to spend in the coming 4 to 5 years. So yeah, I do believe that the Conservative approach that's a bit more prudent and a little bit more focused on getting us effectively out of the pandemic and having a successful job-based economic recovery is important. But then further down the road, being able to balance the budget so that we can secure our future and know that our grandchildren aren't going to have to pay that price.
Thank you for that. It's great that we're able to get the different perspectives across this panel here. It's really appreciated. Carolyn, let's bring your voice in to round this out. Why are we doing this? What's at stake? And what's the elevator pitch? Just on mute right now still.
Sorry, and I had to switch to my phone because my computer decided to act silly.
Not a problem.
So yeah, we're all part of this IT adjusting it. Well, my question is, why are we doing this? Like, we're 2 years out of an election with a whole bunch of excellent debates that were in the House that we needed to address. I mean, I have been waiting for daycare since I had brown hair, and it's been almost 50 years since that debate has been going on, and it's very frustrating because why would we call an election before we get that settled? Why did we call an election before we dealt with a number of these critical issues that could have been completed beforehand? Yes, Afghanistan is a major issue, but even more so in the middle of a pandemic, and not only a pandemic, but a fourth wave of a pandemic, to which now all our numbers are going up. And God bless those poor folks in Alberta. And this is, and I understand about fiscal responsibility, because in fact, New Democrats have a history of being more fiscally cautious than any of the other governments. Provincially, you'll see they're always within their targets, where other parties say they're going to save money and end up spending more money. Having said that, we're dealing with people dying, literally dying every day. In fact, we just had a friend's sister just died the night before last from COVID because people told her she didn't need to get vaccinated. And so this is a moment in time from 1918. This is a moment in time where we've had to do it this time. And yes, I agree. We had lessons to learn from SARS, which the politicians didn't learn to have implemented so that we would have been less in a mess right now. But right now is not the time to say cut back on any of those issues. I do believe that, in fact, it costs less to house people than to have them homeless and going into the emergency all the time. I do believe it's more cost effective to have daycare centers so moms can get back to work and pay taxes than to be unemployed or on welfare. I do believe that the healthcare system, long-term care facilities need to be funded properly so that we don't have the crises that we had happen, that nurses knew about this decades ago and wrote reports on it. So that never happens again. So I agree that we all want to be fiscally responsible, but there's things that we haven't gotten around to do for decades and decades, if not centuries, that if they had been done, we would be in a much better fiscal pharmacare, perfect example. I've seen patients get so ill because they're only 45 and can't afford their medications. And so they go into the hospital where they can get them. So they wait till they're so sick, they go into the hospital and get them. That is not fiscally responsible. Pharmacare is so much more effective than, and I've seen them because I used to be the primary care provider in the homes, and they would be without their drugs because they didn't qualify. And so they waited until they got so sick, they would admitted to hospital for 4 or 5 days, got stabilized, came home, and then went through the same cycle again because they couldn't afford their pharmaceuticals. So these are kinds of things where we could be saving money and bringing down the deficit if we had the political will.
Going into the next round, thanks, Carolyn. Let's go a little more local. It's just amazing. I'm just looking at the time, and for sure, I know that our listeners are going to want us to get a little more local here and make those connections. This has been great. And maybe we'll go back around. I'm going to start with Carolyn again. Let's go a little more local. I think we've got some representation really from the three main ridings in our area, which of course our listeners know are Windsor-Tecumseh, Windsor West, and Essex, of course. So maybe we'll go around a little bit and ask maybe, what do you think is the most sort of, or the biggest issue? Maybe not your most important, but maybe from a campaign perspective or from maybe the electorate perspective, what do you think is the biggest issue in your riding? And how do you think the campaign is going? Maybe those two together.
Yeah, and of course it's really difficult to pick one, but I would certainly say housing is a critical issue. There's no, they can't build the houses fast enough, and the houses they're building, young folks will never be able to afford for many, if ever, generations. The other issue is the environment, which tags on to housing. The environment should tag on to every single issue that we talk about, but certainly the housing issue is we have homelessness, which also costs the system, versus building affordable apartments, but also for young couples or young people who want to get into the market but can't. So those are the and we know that is part of the determinants of health too. A homeless person or a person living substandardly, or using up all of their paycheck just to pay for the rent between the two of them, it just is it's not criminal, but it should have been happening a long time ago. The federal government stopped building many decades ago. I think it was 1984. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but they stopped building. Co-op stopped, affordable housing stopped. And so we are so far behind the 8 ball on this one that it's going to be huge catch up instead of it having been a regular human rights plan.
Damien, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll find, I think between the three of us, you won't find that much difference. I would say a couple things specifically that I've heard in Windsor West is particularly in the West End with regard to that some of the houses up there, and I know that's an issue that's certainly come up. But beyond that, though, jobs in the economy and making sure that, how we recover and making sure, like, for instance, that there's childcare to support those folks. And I know that there are 8 deals that are in place right now with provinces and territories to remain with Alberta and Ontario. And I think Doug Ford's been noticeably absent from this election campaign by his own choice. But I would just underscore, the notion of that housing. And I know that there's a very detailed Liberal plan on housing, liberal.ca. You can actually search by term, regarding whatever your interest is, and there's a lot of depth to that plan. It's been well received. I would also say on climate, the Liberal climate plan has been very well received. Those with expertise in climate and the economy have given top marks to the Liberal plan on climate. And I would also say on housing, we've also received top marks from independent experts on that plan. And that really kind of comes down to what that, in terms of the communities that we're campaigning in, it comes down to a question of credibility and which party has the plan that can be delivered on and that people will see results on. So again, I'm going to say that again for those who are listening or watching. Liberal.ca. You can take a look at the platform. You can search by term, and I will put in a plug for the hashtag Forward for Everyone. But there's a lot of content there, and as and for those folks who are making up their mind, I would encourage them not just to take a look at the Liberal plan, but at all the parties' plans, and to take a look at what people are saying about those plans. And back to that point, though, about how these issues touch locally. Certainly housing, certainly jobs, the economy and climate and childcare, but also, as I said before, issues in the West End. in Windsor West.
Carolyn's like, yeah, but I only stuck to one.
Yeah,
Over-
eh? What's with
Denise,
that?
Denise.
That's that orange wall behind him. He was voicing all the new Democratic policies for me, so I didn't have to say them myself.
Well, now I don't know if I have to give rebuttal here, but I'm going to go over to Denise. Let's talk about Windsor-Tecumseh, and I appreciate that everybody wants to get, sort of the party, the platform. It's what Denise was saying earlier, right? Like, the party does have a platform, but we do want to move it a bit locally. I'm sure people want to hear about our perspectives of local campaigns, what's going on the ground. Denise, what do you think is really what are people hearing at the doors? What's the biggest issue in Windsor-Tecumseh?
Well, I think all of the things that my other two colleagues have mentioned are all things that the campaign has heard at the door in Windsor-Tecumseh. But I think people are worried about how we recover from this pandemic. I think people are worried about us learning enough lessons from this to be better prepared. And one of the things that I was impressed with in the Conservative platform was investment in our own vaccine development, investment in personal protective equipment, putting some barriers in place and tariffs so that we would not be reliant on PPE coming from other countries, but that we would be able to ensure that our healthcare workers and people who were in frontline positions were safe if and when we ever have to face another virus similar to this one in the future. So I think pandemic recovery, I think certainly economic recovery. I think a lot of people in Windsor-Tecumseh and Windsor West and Essex are concerned about healthcare in general and our hospital, even though that is specifically a provincial issue. There's still healthcare transfer dollars that come from the federal government that will come into play in that, and certainly investment in infrastructure around things that are going to improve the environment. So some of the things in our plan about investment in the green economy, investment in public transit to help reduce carbon emissions, some of those kinds of things. I know from a local perspective, we don't have the most effective local transit system when you get out to Tecumseh and LaSalle and Lakeshore. And so enhancing that, if that was an opportunity through federal government infrastructure dollars, would be something that would not only be good for the economy in terms of making people able to get to where jobs are located out in the county. And oftentimes we have newcomers to Canada that are all clustered in the city, and the jobs that they would be willing to take are out in the county and they can't get to them. So I think looking at some of those kinds of issues are some of the things that we've heard. So yeah, I think we have really, really interesting local races, all three ridings. And I think it's because we're blessed to have really good candidates from all the parties, not just the three parties that are represented here, but actually all of the parties. I was quite impressed. I read through the credentials of all of the different people running for the Green Party, for the PPC, for, like I said, obviously the NDP, the Liberal and the Conservative candidates. So I think that says something about democracy in Canada, that good people are still willing to come forward and stand to be candidates. And that makes me kind of proud as someone from this community that we have good people who care about Windsor Essex and care about representing us in government. And I think that gives a great amount of choice to voters in our local communities.
Well,
I was
going to say, I agree with that very much. But, one of the things that we always get criticized for is to not mention every single cause, because somebody will say, well, what about me? And it's true that we're valuing the Indigenous, the racial, the LGBTQ, the people living with disabilities, the environmental issues and social justice are all issues that if you went to knock on 50 doors, you'd probably get 75 needs that were out there. And so you have to remember that all of our, and that's, the joy of canvassing is that you get, your heartfelt, almost a connection with people that gee whiz, this person is really being affected by this. And it takes it out of the intellectual argument into the struggle that individual person is having. And it's right at your doorstep or at their doorstep when you're hearing it.
gosh, guys, I don't know if we're going to have a show after this. And I know that I'm getting the pressure of, we're almost an hour, if not already an hour there. But I'm going to shake it up a little bit. I'm going to ask some harder questions because I heard, effective campaigns are about believing in it. I don't know, maybe I'm old and you can see my hair, but I've seen a lot of successful campaigns with really crappy candidates. I've seen fantastic candidates who really care lose. So I'm already, you started me off with, I was a little bit cynical, and here I go. And I want to go local. And Carolyn, it's really interesting what you're saying, because here's the thing. We can spend another hour and just listing the issues we have in this nation of ours, this great nation of ours, and we wouldn't be done. And so that's why I think in many ways, it's almost like if you don't mention something, like you don't care about it. And that's really even strange with social media these days. It's like, you know what? And somebody didn't repost that or retweet it. You don't care about that issue. And I think it's also part of our social media landscape and lens that we look at things. I'm just going to say realistically, while I think there are many people in Windsor and Essex County that care about the issue that you just raised, call me cynical. Would it actually have an impact on a local campaign? And I mean, it goes back to the dynamic, Denise was mentioning it. Am I voting for the candidate? Am I voting for the party? Am I voting for the leader? There are so many factors. It's so complicated. And then you add policy and those types of issues. And this is why it's unpredictable. Take a look at the numbers that Dawn mentioned earlier, and how unknown it is at this moment. Did we lose Damien? Because I was going to go to him.
Yeah, maybe start with someone else. I'm
Okay,
just going to try to
so
get him back.
Let me go to Carolyn, and then actually, why don't I go to Denise? Because Denise actually mentioned, all the candidates across all the ridings, and you mentioned PPC. So, we had an option on the show. Who do we invite? And are we going to invite, the voice of someone speaking on behalf of PPC and happily become transparent as to the choices that we made? But Denise, PPC, we're seeing the numbers. And I'm not talking about that national number, and can they win a seat? But I would like to go local. And do you think the PPC voters are going to have an impact? And by that, I don't mean are they going to win, but will they have an impact on our local campaigns? And if you want to speak specifically to Windsor-Tecumseh or to any of the ridings, I see. I'm just going to let Damien come in just to hear that, if that's okay. Just give him a minute to connect. Hey, Damien, are you back with us? I hope so. So I guess my question, Denise, is do you think, okay, great, thanks. I just want you to hear it because we're going to go around a little bit. Will the PPC have an impact on the local campaign? And if so, who do you think they're pulling votes from in these local campaigns? I'm going to go to Denise because you mentioned them first.
Well, I think certainly if you read what many of the media pundits are saying, they'll be pulling votes from the Conservatives because a lot of that, some of the support is people who would be what I would call maybe on the far right side of the Conservative Party. So I think it absolutely is going to have an impact. I think one of the it's a strength and it's a challenge of our Canadian system. I think because we are a multi-party system. And, it was an interesting debate. I only watched the English language one. I'll be honest. I didn't tune into the French one, even though I can understand French. Having 5 different parties and 5 different perspectives represented was really interesting. But even just the format they had to try to put in place to give everybody an opportunity to speak was challenging. So I do think the fact that we have multi-parties, we've got the Green Party, we've got the PPC, we have the NDP, the Conservative, the Liberals, and then you get right out into the Rhinoceros Party and some of the out west. You've got your other some of your other more in the Bloc Québécois. So yes, I think it's absolutely going to impact on a local riding perspective. You might see the PPC pulling some votes from the Conservatives. Where you have 2 strong candidates from the Liberal and the NDP, you might end up getting support siphoned off from one candidate to the other, and that creates more of a 3-party opportunity where in the past it may have been more solidly. For example, Brian Massey was pretty solid as an NDP, but now you've got a strong Liberal candidate. How's that going to play out in the Windsor West riding? So I do think that the fact that we are a multi-party system is a strength, because you don't get the polarization and division that you're seeing right now in the US, for example. But it is also a challenge in that those smaller parties do siphon votes from the larger ones and may end up undermining a particular candidate in favor of a different one. So I think it's going to be, I think Monday night's going to be a very interesting evening.
It's interesting to hear Denise talk about sort of the votes sort of splitting on the right. Those on the left have been watching it for a very long time. I'm going to go to Carolyn next as Damien warms up here, coming back in. Carolyn, maybe specifically in Essex, I don't think there's going to be any shortage of impact of PPC votes in Essex. Do you think they're just pulling from the Conservatives, or do you think they may be pulling from other parties? What are your thoughts on the impact that the PPC is going to have on this election locally?
Well, I worked in the mass vaccination clinic there in Amherstburg, and we're seeing people who were really excited about getting their vaccinations and others who were really hesitant, and the coaching and support they needed to make those decisions. For some of these folks who are really dealing with their viewpoint that they should have a choice and those kinds of things, and that's kind of creating a polarization. It is, and I'm a little concerned about it, because they've had a voice in the South that's kind of brought them together to legitimize that kind of very risky behavior, especially having just had a friend who died, a friend's sister who died, who was talked out of getting her vaccination. So those kinds of polarizing views that may not be based on ethics and science and those kinds of issues is kind of we have to pay attention. So I would say that those folks who are really struggling with what to believe, be it science or something else, are from all over the map. I hope that we in the New Democrat Party don't lose too many. We lose enough to the Liberals when the Liberals borrow our policies, so we don't need any to go to the PPC. But having said that, I think it can be anywhere, and that's not to say that even the kind of the mainstay parties aren't at risk for losing, not just the Conservatives.
Damien, I think you heard the rest of it as you sort of dipped in and out. We're trying to go a little more local, get a little bit more into the mix of what's happening on the ground and what we think is going to happen. Impact of the PPC vote locally.
I'm not trying to be cautious on purpose. I don't know. And I think that we will find out a lot, not just on Monday, but there are going to be mail-in ballots that are counted in the days after. Pardon me, in the days after. I'm concerned about what happens with the PPC. I don't know what the motivating. I don't know what the unifying or the motivating factor of them are, and I don't think they do either. We're in a moment right now in time and in history. What will that mean in another election? What will that mean after that win? And there's always a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, and a lot of personal experiences that are projected into politics. That's how it should be. But I worry about, the ways in which they've gone about things. One of the riding presidents was, threw stones at the prime minister, and so I don't think that's representative of all of them all. But I don't know. And so I don't know how the vote will turn out. I don't know what's in the future for them. But and I think a lot of I don't pretend to speak for a lot of people, but speaking for myself, it's just that lack of that uncertainty is cause for interest. I'll put it that way.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And so no, not at all. And I also I think that Carolyn had a good point that these are people who will come from across the spectrum of the existing political spectrum, and so I don't think there'll be some data, there'll be some information, and I think post-election there'll be some time, there'll be some reflection on who they are, on what they are, and how they, how they carry themselves moving forward. Yeah, they at this point, there's not a to going back to a question earlier, why are we here? What's at stake? What's the elevator pitch? If there was a representative, I'd be very curious. Right. I think I have an idea, but in terms of how that's reflected locally, I just don't know. And it's there is definitely signs, not many, but they're there. There are more PPC signs and Green Party signs that I've seen, and I'm not sure if that's reflected in the other ridings as well. So it's a curiosity, but yeah. And I know I'm not. I don't have an answer to your question, and so I'm not trying to be obtuse or vague.
Well, of course, that's what we do here at Rose City Politics. We guess and speculate on certain things. So we're not going to hold you to it. I agree with you. By the way, we're really not going to know and do an analysis until after. And actually, Doug will be at the forefront of the data for us. But I just find it interesting. I mean, I heard Denise say that they do pull from the Conservatives, and of course that has you could take a look at what that might look like. But again, this is just based on what I'm seeing. I'm not so sure that's where it is, and I think I agree with Damien a little more that we might see it. I've talked to a lot of people who, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I've heard from people who traditionally you would think actually vote NDP. They're union members, especially auto workers who suddenly are speaking PPC language. So I just don't think that we can assume because of the political spectrum, because it's a little to the right, that you're thinking they're pulling here. I think we're going to have a really fun time analyzing it. Fun is maybe not the right word, depending on what's happening, which maybe be the right segue into the next piece, whoever wants to pick it up. Is that you, John?
Yeah, I guess we will we're going to focus, I guess, right now on the very, very local and where we think things are going to be going here, and then at the national stage as well. And I'm actually really excited to hear, I think, the justifications for your answers. I think we all know exactly what you're going to say, but I want to know why you're going to say what you're going to say. So, Denise, let's start with you on this one. What's happening locally here across the three, and what do you think's happening at the federal level?
Well, that is a great question. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'll give you my thoughts. I expect we will see Chris Lewis be reelected in Essex. I am not sure that what's going to happen in either of the other two ridings. And again, some of it is because there's been a lot of interest, I think, in the different perspectives on the different party platforms. I think there's been a lot, we have, as I said, some good candidates. So I think we could end up with some unusual results, not the typical orange that we have seen in the past, but I think they're going to be very close races, and I think that that's going to make it very interesting. At a national level, the Bloc Québécois is a huge factor, and how that plays out, there was obviously some input from the Quebec Premier that was sort of trying to, sway voters away from the Bloc, and so, again, the regionality of Canadian politics is always very interesting, and how that plays out on election night. So I anticipate, obviously I'm hopeful for a minority government led by the Conservatives. That's what I would like to see. I don't think we have enough strength on either side to see a majority. And I'm okay with that, because some of the best legislation in Canada has come from minority governments, because it forces people to collaborate and to share perspectives more effectively. So a Conservative minority government is what I anticipate we'll end up with on a national level. And like I said, I think we're going to have two really close races in Windsor West and Windsor-Tecumseh, and I anticipate Chris being reelected in Essex.
Interesting. Thank you for that perspective there. We're going to have to see how the cards fall on the table, if you will, when we get to there. Damien, let me bring you in next on this one. Same question, looking across the three ridings locally here, what are you expecting? And then what do you expect federally?
I will start locally. I think Essex, you've got, you've got a former member running against a current member. That creates a dynamic, very much, a rematch of the last election. I'm curious to see what the influence of the PPC does there, and the context in which we find the election, which we've already spoken about. In Windsor-Tecumseh, you've again got a former member running against a current member, and that again creates a dynamic. Different parties, but very once again the PBC. That's why I go again before that point about where that vote goes, who turns, and it comes down to turnout, right? And I know it's a cliche. Every vote counts. Every vote does count. And so if there was ever a reminder of that, I think it'll be this particular election. So curious what happens there. And of course, Windsor West, you've got a 20-year veteran, the NDP caucus chair, running against a former senior cabinet minister in the provincial government. You've got two, and again, my point be turnout. And you've had, I think you've had some significant turnout through advanced polls. And I think there's going to be folks who are making up their mind, and that's okay. And again, I used to quip about this in provincial politics, that in Ontario politics, people tend to make up their mind in the last 72 hours. Someone told me I was being generous. People are very busy. People have had a lot of things going on in their lives, and the expectation of politicos that, don't you know, haven't you already over the course, haven't you been following the parliamentary debate? And I will be charitable. And I'll be charitable and say, that the parliamentary logjam we found ourselves in going into the summer, haven't you been following that? No, people haven't been. They've been, there's been a lot, even in normal times, people have been confronted with a lot of things. So I think it'll fundamentally come down to turnout. Hopefully it's not a case where a thunderstorm somewhere or a what have you has an undue influence, but no, I'm incredibly curious. I am curious about the PPC in Windsor West. I don't know, and again, I've said that phrase now, I think, just about every question, and it's not because I'm again trying to avoid answering the question. It's just, to use an overused expression, unprecedented time with the emergence of another party on the right. So, and nationally, look. I suspect there's going to be a surprise one way or the other. There always is in elections, and I think that there will be some kind of surprise, whether that's people making up their mind in the last. Because again, voting at this point now, special ballots, mail-in ballots, advanced polls, those are done. Those who've made up their mind have voted. There still remains a smaller but sizable chunk of folks who either will vote or will make up their mind based on what they're seeing in the last few days, or will not vote and say, you know what, I've decided not to, and that's their choice. It's disappointing, but I suspect it will be the former rather than the latter. But curious what others have to say.
I did my advance vote, I guess yesterday or the day before. Everyone here on the panel, raise your hand if you've advance voted. Pat.
Oh, come on, Pat.
Look,
Pat,
I've
you're
been
sitting next to the sign.
I know. Listen, you think I'm not going to vote?
I'm not concerned about that. It's not surprising though to see that.
I'll even tell you who I'm voting for, dude.
It's not surprising we got an overwhelming majority here who did the advanced vote. We'll bring your voice in, Carolyn. Same question. What do you think is going to be happening locally and then nationally?
Well, I'll have to disagree with Damien in that I do think that Tracy Ramsey is going to do very well in Essex. And I'll tell you why, because Tracy's not only worked really hard as a member of parliament when she was a member, she spoke up to defend people, and that was really understood. And not only that, but in the last 4 years, she didn't disappear. I mean, she was out and about all the time dealing with other social issues that had to do with what she believed in. And now she's back, and it's exciting to know that Essex will have a great rep in Parliament again. And I think that when you're talking about the number of votes that happened, like there were lineups for hours in Amherstburg. I mean, the polls were just packed. And so I think that that's telling you that people actually have a huge interest in, for whatever reason, whether it's because the election was called early or it's because they have a particular issue that they wanted to support. But I do believe that I haven't really, to be honest, and I've had many other people say, we really haven't seen much of Chris at all, and Chris Lewis at all. And I know he's, got a few more signs up in the Kingsville area, which is where he's from, but he hasn't been visible. So I think that's been making people's minds up there. I think people, and I have talked to people, that they just are really frustrated that the Liberals haven't carried through on issues like the environment. I know they've got a plan, but they haven't acted on it. And people are in my circle are reacting, and that's a non-Democrats, to be honest. They're concerned about that. They're frustrated that the daycare got missed. They're frustrated that a number of other things didn't go through. So. Which could have gone through if we hadn't called an election at this moment in time. And certainly the pandemic has also caused an added frustration. So I do think that Tracy's got an excellent chance at gaining her seat back, because she's been present and she's extremely well liked. So that's where I'm coming from that. As far as federally, nationally, I do know that it's going to, if you look at just have to look at the polls. I mean, the Liberals and the Tories are neck and neck, and the New Democrats are climbing there. And we all know as insiders that you need one bad incident by one politician or their support staff that could turn full circle on them. So who knows what's going to happen between now and September 20th. But what I do know that Jagmeet is going to be the balance of power, and I think therefore we'll get a lot more done. As she was saying, I think a majority government does work well because everybody has to compromise, and I think if they're wise, a minority government does work well if everybody is truly committed to getting things done, and not just trying to gain power again. So yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. I mean, there's certainly pockets in the West that Jagmeet might be able to take that weren't there before, and who knows what's going to happen in Quebec? Probably 4 seats there, and it's a basketball or a ping pong game between the Bloc and the Liberals in Quebec. So who knows about that one? But we'll just have to all cross our fingers. And as a New Democrat, of course, I'm eternally optimistic that if we had one more vote, we would have won. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I know we want to wrap it up. Maybe we should just locally mention who all the candidates and the parties are. Is that a good idea for everyone? So just a quick, you know what, I'm hoping I may not know all the ones in Essex, but so we've got Windsor-Tecumseh in the riding of Windsor-Tecumseh for those like me who haven't voted but may have need to make up their mind. We've got the incumbent running for the Liberal Party, Eric Kuzmerchik. We have for the NDP, Cheryl Hardcastle, who was a previous MP in that riding, unseated by Eric Kuzmerchik. The local Conservative candidate, and help me here, is it Kathy Borelli? Is it Catherine or Kathy?
Kathy.
Right, Kathy, right. We also have, I don't know if you wanted me to mention everybody, but Victor Green is running for the PPC and Laura Chesnick is running for the Marxist-Leninist Party. We also have a Rhino Party in Windsor-Tecumseh, James Ray. Over here in Windsor West, we've got incumbent Brian Massey running for the NDP, Sandra Pupatello running for the Liberals, both no names here. We have Anthony Orlando running for the Conservatives. Matthew, help me, Matthew for the
Giancola.
PPC. Thank you. And Margaret Villamazar for the Marxist-Leninist Party. Over in Essex, we have incumbent Chris Lewis running for the Conservatives. Tracy Ramsey, again, a no name, running for the NDP. Audrey Festeriga running for the Liberal Party. And I'm sorry, but somebody else is going to help me with any other candidates over in Essex. Any others worth
Well, if they're
mentioning?
not on the call, if they're not on the line right now, then
There you go. There you go. Okay. I'm going to get hate mail. You know this, right?
No, but do we have a list of those other candidates?
Yeah, we should probably. Anybody? Sorry. I'll look it up. Take us home, John.
I will do just that while Pat pulls up
Here
that
we
right
go.
there. You know, it's so interesting to have been able to hear your different perspectives across the board here. Very important election. Every election is a very important election, just by the very nature of it. I kind of find that the question, to be honest, to opine a little bit myself here about, oh, is this a necessary election? Is this an unnecessary election? You know, I find that to be a really odd question. It seems like it, to me personally, it doesn't really have much of a play here. It's the prime minister's prerogative to, you know, go to the governor general and request the ability to move forward and whatnot. So I personally don't fall into this trap right now about whether it's necessary or unnecessary. But I don't think anyone here on the panel would disagree with the fact that we're in the midst of a global pandemic still, right? So inevitably the ballots that are going to be cast and the way things are going to go are going to be of the utmost importance. It's determining to a certain extent how we're going to be moving forward, and whatever way that is going to look like. And that's, you know, I find it a little funny to hear some of the opposition leaders saying, you know, we think it's an unnecessary election, but here's the reasons why you should vote for us. You know, I mean, we all sort of, we understand that it's happening, and that's the extent. And so while Pat has pulled up the last names here, I just want to say to everyone who has advanced voted, thank you so much. I mean, how excellent, how great. Pat, you're the interloper here who's off to your own by not doing so, but you're incredibly busy, and we all understand that, of course. But and just make sure that if you are listening to this right now, I hope that we've been able to provide you with a bit of background, a bit of an understanding as to where you know, political insiders see this going, and a bit of some perspectives on the campaigns. And Pat, I'll let you take it from right here before I take it out.
Sounds good, John. Thanks. And you know what, just because I didn't know off the top of my head, I'm glad we're going to get all the names in, because as we started at the very beginning of the show, regardless of what your philosophies may be, you know, to put your name on a ballot for whatever reason, that's the democratic process. So here we go. I did miss the Green candidate in Windsor-Tecumseh, and that's Henry Uleve, I believe is how it's pronounced. I hope it is. Marxist-Leninist has a candidate, Laura Chesnick, I think I mentioned. Let's go over to Essex. As was mentioned, we've got the Conservative, NDP, and Liberal candidates. We also have a Green Party candidate there, Nancy Pancheshan. People's Party of Canada, Beth Sharon Roberry, Christian Heritage Party of Canada, Jeremy Palco, and Independent Andrew George pulling in the last one there. So there you have it, your candidates in the three ridings. Thank you so much to the guests that were all here today to provide us with you know, some local insight, as well as from the experience of on the campaign trails, either as candidates or in election campaigns. Never a dull moment. Over to you, John, to take us out.
Well, I just want to jump. I just want to jump in real quick. One, I want to advocate for vote by mail. This time around, I voted by mail. It wasn't my intention to do so, but I did because I was had to provide some technical support to someone who wanted to vote by mail. So I went through the process, and that is the fastest I've ever voted. The whole process between, requesting the ballot, filling out the ballot and sending it in took me maybe 5 minutes, all of which was in the comfort of my own home. So the only downside is that I believe they don't count those votes till the next day. So you're going to make partisans have a heart attack if too many of us do it. But it is extremely convenient for the elector. And thanks to our panelists for coming in. Really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate the diversity of views. That's what this show is all about. Really enjoyed seeing those of you again who I've known before, and really nice to meet Carolyn. Haven't had a chance to meet you before. Really appreciate you coming on.
No problem. It's been great.
You're a chump, Doug. You missed out on getting the souvenir. Everyone this year gets to keep the pencil. I mean, it's amazing. It hit me like a brick wall. She was like, "No, you get to keep it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is democracy." The next time I go golfing, I'll think about my vote. This is wonderful. Well, thank you though so much to the three of you, Denise, Carolyn, and Damien. Really appreciate you coming on, giving us your perspectives, speaking to us about this election. 44, Denise Ghanam, past Conservative and municipal candidate. Carolyn Davies, nurse practitioner, healthcare activist, longtime NDP supporter, and Damien O'Brien, Director of Parliamentary Affairs for Natural Resources Ministry, former Queen's Park staffer, and a Liberal. We appreciate the three of you for, not only coming on the show, but being involved in local politics. That's what we espouse here. We try to tell the stories of the stories that you're reading in the news. And this was one of those excellent episodes where we were able to get some amazing perspectives. So thank you again so very much. Our regular panel tonight on Rose City Politics included Doug Sartori, Pat Papadeus, and myself, John Lidke. If you are a Patreon subscriber, thank you so very much. If you're not, get over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We appreciate the support. We are in print monthly. We are online all the time at bizxmagazine.com. So check out our columns there where we dive a little bit deeper. It's hard to believe that we do deeper dives than the weekly podcast where we dive into the issues, but it is true. It happens. You're going to want to check that out. We're on social media, wherever you get your podcasts. And Rose City Politics has been able to broadcast live on tape for the past 16 months due to the kind support of LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. It's been a hell of a pandemic, folks. It's not quite over yet. But thank you so much to LiUNA 625 for helping us to continue to tell the stories and the stories behind the stories. We will be back next week. And again, thank you so much, Denise, Carolyn, Damien. You're welcome here whenever you want. Feel free to drop in, click that Zoom link. It's always active. Even when we're not doing a show, sometimes I'll just talk to you if you want to drop in. Feel free. So Rose City Politics, folks. See you next week.